Hello everybody and welcome to exercise 2 of folding mirror corrugations. Now I have here in front of me a paper that is already folded in the middle, but let's ignore that. Pretend that there's no fold, that it's just a blank piece of paper. Now for this exercise we're going to build up to the third one, okay? So it's going to be a two-step thing. But for this one we're going to fold our radial center at a corner. So this exercise, instead of having the mirror sort of happening on this sort of line or on this line, we're going to center it around a line of symmetry that's radial, that's polar, going around the center, sort of rotating around. So what we need is to establish our mirror symmetry at a corner. Now the next exercise we're going to put it on a center, but I think that it's easier to do first when we do it at a corner. I think that is going to be the easiest first logical step. So let's just go real easy and go for an 8-fold symmetry. Now the question you might have is, how do I know which symmetry I'm in? And the answer has to do with how you're dividing your angles. So for instance, right now we've just folded a right angle in half. What is a right angle in radians? We have to do a video on radians itself, but what is an angle in radians, a right angle in radians? Well, what is an angle? What is a radian? Well, damn, I don't want to get into that right here, right now. But let me just say then, you have to trust me, that a right angle is half of pi. Pi over 2, half of pi. So that means that 2 right angles is pi. So for instance, at that point where this line is, the angle at a line is pi. That's the way you can think about it. An angle at a line, the angle of a line is pi. So a right angle being half of a line, as you can sort of see, is pi over 2. And then we divide in half again, so it's half of a half. That's a fourth, right? A half times a half is a fourth. And now we fold this in half. And so we're multiplying a fourth times another half. So a fourth times a half is an eighth. So that means that the symmetry we're going to work on is 8-fold, is what we call it in English. In Spanish, we don't really have a word for foldness. We just say something akin to symmetry line of symmetry, or something like that, or radial symmetry, but we don't say explicitly 8-fold. We don't say the number and then the word fold, even though that the concept of folding is pretty prevalent. Now, this is the second time I've recorded this video, because the first video I did actually, I sort of got carried away and started folding in like patterns and whatnot, but I don't want to do that. So, you have a choice to make here. Like, what kind of mirror do you want to shoot around? Now, because the last one was kind of random, I think that's the way we should go. So here's what we can do. You can start by, again, like holding on your 8-fold symmetry. And actually, maybe not. But remember last time when we had that it was the mountain where the point hits. And what happens is where the point hits, the line is going to change afterwards. So let's just say that I'm going to fold just a random angle, and I'm focusing on where this line hits and goes off. It could go the other way, but I want it to sink this way. This is the way. So if I were to choose that point on the mountain, I want it to sink this way. I want it to go this way. You can even see that what's happening a little bit as I squeeze this line. Notice that also it's acute. It's an acute angle towards the mountain. So it's there, and then what's happening? That's my line of symmetry. And that's going to change into a valley now. So this is the mountain, it hits it and then changes into a valley. So I have to give space for it. There we go. Sorry for all turning around, but that's what it is. And then I fold it. I'm not folding it all the way. I'm folding it to where it hits the next line of symmetry. That's all I really need. Next line of symmetry, then I stop. And so this line of symmetry now gets turned up. Now I fold this one, and it hits another line of symmetry. And I can fold this one now, and back. Now the difference between this exercise and the last one is that this one cannot allow, quote unquote, we can do it, but we don't allow it for this exercise, to change the line of symmetry. These lines that go off, they need to stay that way. We can't have them be all different. That's just a rule that we're going to set up, because otherwise then we risk the lines of symmetry somehow deviating and hitting each other. And we don't want that. We want this to be a clean collapse like this. Okay, so we've added one line. Now let's add another one. So if this is a mountain, so it's going to be a valley here. So I can turn my paper over, or just fold it like this, and just decide on which angle I want it to be hitting. And I can choose something that looks kind of interesting. I like the way that it looks because it's close to where yeah, I like this. So I can fold this as a straight line. You can see that this line is going to be changing now from a mountain to a valley. Now I can look on the side and see that I was missing. See? So I just compress, I make sure the point is where it needs to be, and course correct, you see? So the valley is now hitting this mountain, and off I go into collapsing. This is the word I use for this movement, a collapse. Now you can undo the ones you had before. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, by undoing I mean that we can sort of liberate the space a little bit, just so that it's easier to fold. He said while he fumbled. And so there we go. I fold until I hit the line of symmetry, then back, then line of symmetry, the 8-fold line changes from mountain to valley. I extend, and also notice I'm doing one more thing when I do these. These lines are matching. There's 2 layers here. You see that? And they're together. So that's also another thing, that these, because the lines of symmetry don't change, they have this sort of mirror capacity to them. Now these are more reflections, or they look more like reflections than their free-form counterpart, the one we did last one where it wasn't radial. And so as you can see, we're kind of moving along in this stream of consciousness as this thing sort of evolves and comes up and comes down, and we can play inside of it too. Just got to look out for the mountains. So for instance, they're the mountains, so that means that a valley is the one that's going to hit here. Oh no, a mountain's going to hit there? Oh yeah, because it opens up. So this mountain will open up into a mountain. You can even see that I can just select a point like this, or rather select just 2 points, like one here, one on this line and one on the other, like that. And then just by virtue of collapsing this thing, you notice that I'm just accommodating, and then it just happens. And as we move down the line, it's going to be somehow easier, somehow, not always, but somehow it does get easier. And now the challenge is, well, for instance, this line that we can see that goes all the way up here. You can ask, well, why can't I cross it? Why can't this line just all of a sudden decide to go in? And you can make a case for it. You can make it so, but what's going to happen is you're going to need another mirror. So where's that mirror going to be situated? So for instance, if I were to suddenly decide that somehow like this middle line that I have here is somehow part of it, and I mirrored it, just as an intersection. It's easier to also do mirrors when the rest of the folds aren't activated, but this is just an example. So if I were to say, well, I want to include this guy, I want to include these mirrors that I have here into my thing, but notice that when I try and collapse it, there's all these crashes going on. It's not so simple. Now I need a new line, and it's possible. I mean, it is technically possible to go from that, just add some lines. Add a line here, a point there, and just make it go up, top, down. And just squeeze the thing. But see, as I start collapsing this thing, now there's all these problems going to be popping up. Namely, what's going to happen with this? You know what I mean? Like this mirror now is hitting there, and therefore it has to bounce back. And further, inside there's all this space that the paper doesn't know what to do with, because it's just too much. It's much too much. It's not flat. It has to do a little thing in order for it to be flat. So these kinds of situations of intersections creates problems like this, which are not, they're not unsolvable, but they do require some kind of a greater capacity for them. So what I'm going to do now is just simply keep adding lines, keep adding just new points. So for instance, if I choose, I want it to have as many as I possibly can, so I'm not going to put it too far away. So I'm going to choose a point on this mountain just a little bit above, and then I'm going to choose here. Also notice that I'm going ahead and just using the mountain itself to drag a point to where I need it to be. And so I could do the same thing here, where I choose the mountain and then the point here, and then these two just connect to each other. Just 1, 2, and then this one will join in. And all I have to do is just make it flat. But to make it flat, remember that these have to match. All of these have to match. I can see that there's like some slight inaccuracies here, but it's fine. So now the point on this mountain is going to be here, and I can choose it as close to this point as I want it to be. So I like the way it looks. The fucking truck is passing, sorry about that. So again, notice that I'm just point, valley, and point where I want it to be, and then mountain, drop. And then the next one, or the one beside it, is gonna have to be, you know, you got to figure out where it is. Because if it's gonna be flat, it has to be the same. If they're not the same, then deviance occurs. So what I'm doing is just making sure that these edges match. Like this edge with that edge matches. That's what I'm trying to do. So I'm pushing on this point. That's the way you can look at it, or you can just do it by steps. Sort of do this one first. You can see that it's sort of collapsing and then it does its thing. Wait a minute. Yeah, of course. I missed it. All right, so yeah, it actually hits a little bit above. So there we go. Hits. And then it does a thing. And so now I'm using this back line, and then it hits on the symmetry, and then boom, and then boom, and off we go. Sorry, it's out of frame there for a second. It's weird to do this, but it's a lot of fun. And you can just explore with this mirror thing, and you can always just have it flat fold as long as you can match it. You know, you gotta be limber. You gotta be on your feet. But nothing is stopping you from just like, you know, going crazy as to how close it is to the edge here, and you know, just making this one. And this one matches to there, that one matches to there. These two hit. I can stretch them, point them, and keep it going. Last trick before we go, because I have a kettle on. I'm going to turn the kettle off, but I'm back into coffee. I stopped drinking coffee for 3.5 months, and the difference was palpable. My anxiety levels dropped. My sleep was the same, but I have the slight suspicion that I might have ADHD. And this is due to a thing I read on a book about ADHD that said that people that have attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder tend to not be so stimulated, quote unquote, by stimulants, right? They feel normal even when under the effects of a stimulant. And actually, when you go to get medicated for ADHD, they actually will prescribe stimulants. All right, so a little last trick before we go. So what I'm doing here is I'm having a star that's going to be off put, so there's no bounce to this one. So I'm just doing a line here that I wanted, but now it's not on the other side. See, I can't use, it's not hitting on this line, which is where the bounce should happen. So this line that goes off is not hitting here. So what can I do? Well, I can collapse it, and I can notice that this thing is sort of falling down, if you will. Or rather, there's a line, there's a clear line as to where this is. So I just have to somehow be able to copy that line onto the other side, and there's several ways we can do it. We can simply have it like this and just partially, just as long as you can get like even a little bit of it, that's good enough. Just get that line in. And then that line just gets extended, and then it hits line symmetry, and then it bounces back and out. And so as you can see, we have here an 8-fold randomized star pattern, which we can have this mirror symmetry corrugation thing going on. And it's fun because it's still flat foldable, it's not as random, and we can have all sorts of shapes happen. So finally, I think that there's a lot of space here. We just have, let's just add one last one over here, just for good measure. Let's see if it needs to be on the other side too. And yeah, it might. So I can't even see where the line is. So what would I do here? It's an interesting problem. So what I could do is wait a minute. I need to somehow take this reference and put it over here. Even it's going to be slight. It's so slight. I can look at it from the top, but there it is. I guess I can just fold everything and just get that little line in, and then that's it. The disadvantage to that is that it does bleed over onto this one. But as far as I can tell, it's pretty much symmetrical. An 8-fold symmetrical mirroring corrugation. Collapses, opens up, and you have all these nice shapes going on, and yeah, this is a little different. Now, there's always the case to be made of combining different symmetry lines. We're not going to get into this right now, but know that you can have more than one line of symmetry and more than one way that those lines can sort of jump around each other. Keep that in mind for later. But we're going to put a stop to this exercise here. Hope you enjoyed it and make the most of it. And I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to color this and then take a screenshot of the coloring, and then that'll be the thumbnail. Cool. All right, guys, see ya.